Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, welcome, welcome. It is Tuesday, it is 4 p.m. ET, and we are so honored and thrilled that you have found us here on Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze. We are so pleased that you are here today. We have a fabulous author. I am your host, Hank Phillippi Ryan, the USA Today bestselling author of 14 novels of suspense. My brand new novel, The House Guest, comes out next Tuesday. Not that I'm not nervous. I'm incredibly nervous about this, as always, when there's a launch. It's sort of Gaslight meets Thelma and Louise by way of strangers on a train. Or is it? Maybe that's the gaslighting part. But today we are not talking about The House Guest. Today we are talking about Better the Blood, this absolutely terrific, riveting, propulsive, unique thriller by Michael Bennett. If you have read this, you will know it is unique and engaging and thought-provoking and life-changing and just full of marvelous things that you've never heard of before and never thought of before. And it is fantastic. I have to tell you, Michael, that my husband snagged this book before I could even get my hands on it, and he loved it as well. So fans here in Boston. You also have fans on Kirkus Reviews who gave you a starred review. And here's Brenda Gaskell here, and Renee Herskowitz is here, and Shannon Hansen. Chanson is here. Pamela Fry-Priest. Shannon says, Hank, don't be nervous. Too late, Shannon, too late. So we are so pleased that you are here today. Let me read you what the Kirkus starred review, part of what it said. Bennett establishes himself as an excellent storyteller. The book's immersion in tribal culture and history makes the greatest impact, lending complexity and sweep to the narrative. One can only hope this is the beginning of a series, and they go on to say a striking debut. So congratulations on that. We'll talk about that in a minute. But Michael is coming to us from Auckland, which looks like it's raining behind you.
Yes, I'm coming from 4 days ago. Auckland went into a state of emergency, and we're still in it. It's summertime, believe it or not, and normally my whole backyard would be brown, but we've had just the most outrageous rain. The whole of my street turned into a river 4 days ago, and that's across the whole of Auckland. So it's starting to be a little bit calmer now. So if this interview had been 4 days ago, those trees would have been bending sideways. Yeah.
What was that like? That must have been terrifying.
Yeah, no, it was. We were really lucky. We're at the bottom of a dip, and we're just above where the river went through. But a whole lot of our neighbours, their houses have been destroyed. And this is central Auckland. We're 2 kilometres from the middle of town, so it's not. Auckland is a city of. There's lots of water everywhere. We're a harbour city, so these things happen, but not like this before. It's climate change, really. Yeah.
It is. And there you are right in the middle of it. Well, we are incredibly grateful that you made time in that chaos to come talk with us and let people here know more about Better the Blood, this absolutely marvelous mystery. Is it the first in a series as Kirkus hoped?
Hank, so the next 4 days, as long as we don't get rained out, I'm finishing the second book, yes. So it's a series, the Hannah Westerman series, yeah.
Do you know what the next one is called? I'm pushing you here.
It's called Return to Blood.
Okay, yeah. I love it. And in about 4 days, I'm going to my mailbox to wait for it because I cannot wait to read this. It is so marvelous. Before we go any farther, you all, let me just say welcome Susie Baldwin, who says we visited Auckland many years ago. And Renee says, so it's February there, yes, but it's also Wednesday in Auckland, correct. And Brenda Gaskell is asking that everybody is so concerned about you. Brenda Gaskell is asking, did you evacuate?
We didn't have to. 3 houses down, they did. There's a council flat of sort of elderly people housing, and they were completely evacuated. So we're just that little bit higher up the road that we missed the water. So we got lucky, but a lot of people around did get evacuated. Yeah.
You have a lot of new friends here who are caring about your safety.
Thank you.
So we're sending you all all the best wishes for a little bit of sun, at least, as you're supposed to have. Welcome, welcome, welcome you all to A Mighty Blaze. If you are new to A Mighty Blaze, let me take a moment to tell you that A Mighty Blaze was started almost 3 years ago by the fabulous powerhouse team of Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt to keep us reading new books, to keep us learning about new authors, to keep up with our favorite authors, and maybe make some new favorites. And I know that Michael Bennett will become one of your new favorites. This is an absolutely terrific book, and I can't wait to talk to Michael about it. Let me introduce you to him a little bit formally. Michael Bennett is an award-winning screenwriter, director, and author whose films have been selections at major festivals, including Cannes, Berlin, Toronto, and New York. His nonfiction book, In Dark Places, which explored an infamous miscarriage of justice, won awards, and his young adult graphic novel, Helen and the Go-Go Ninjas, which wins for Best Title of All Times, was a finalist for the 2019 New Zealand Book Awards. His debut thriller is Better the Blood. And I want you to look at this cover because this is not a random design. And we will be talking about that as we talk about this book. I want to talk to you about history, of course, and the effect on the present, and setting and secrets and family and female empowerment and the class system, and all of those themes. The rest of that Kirkus starred review said, a striking debut and a significant addition to Indigenous literature. What did you think about that? How important is that to you, and why?
I mean, it's I'm very complimented and blown away by everything you said, Hank, and the response internationally to the book has been well beyond what I ever dreamed of, especially because my intention with the book, I felt, was a very specific story. I'm Māori. I'm from the Te Arawa tribe in Rotorua. My sub-tribes are Ngāti Whakaue and Ngāti Pikiā. So I am a Māori author and filmmaker, and pretty much all of my work, I think inevitably, if you're a Māori and you're an artist, inevitably the work that you do is about where we are as a people, as an Indigenous culture. And the book does deal very specifically with, a very short version of what the book is about for readers who haven't read the book yet, is that in the 19th century, when New Zealand was colonized by the British, a Māori chief is wrongfully executed on one of the mountains in Auckland. We're a city of mountains. There's 50 volcanoes that surround us in the city. And each of those volcanoes are very sacred places. So a Māori chief in the 1860s is executed by a British troop of soldiers. And today, 8 generations later, a senior Māori detective in the Auckland CIB named Hannah Westerman, she discovers links between 2 of the murders that have happened that no one's discovered before. They were thought to be separate and unrelated previously. And what she discovers is that the 2 murders that have happened are both descendants, 8 generations later, of 2 of the soldiers in the British troop that executed the Māori chief on the mountain. So she works out that there was 6 soldiers in the troop. 2 descendants have been killed in vengeance for what happened in the 19th century. And unless Hannah can find the killer and stop them, another 4 people are going to die. So it is very specifically about our colonization and the after effects of colonization, because it's for us in New Zealand, it's very clear that colonization isn't just something that happened 180 years ago and then you move on. The after effects are very real. Māori are still on the bottom of all of the key socio-economic demographics, health, access to education. We're only 14% of the population, yet we make up 53% of the prison cells. The after effects of colonization are real and still alive. And thematically, I guess that's the sort of things I wanted to explore in the book. And I guess one of the things I'm so happy about, that it has seemed to have had a real, it's had an effect on readers in different cultures that aren't my own culture, what that does reassure me a little bit is that, perhaps the themes, while they are very specific, and I'm talking about a very specific time and place and people in a very specific city, Auckland, perhaps those themes of injustice and colonization and
And
healing.
class and discrimination and how that
Yeah.
takes over one's entire life. I mean, this book is
Yeah.
full of that, the essence of that in every part of every page. And I love how it's so seamlessly woven through. We sort of see the world so personally through Hannah's eyes, and also in a kind of elegant distance. You have a wonderful balance between being very internal and very observational, which is a fascinating style. Talk a little bit about how you did that.
Well, it's interesting. One of the things that I really wanted to do with the book was a book that was incredibly influential on me when I was way too young to have read it. When I was 10 years old, my brother's girlfriend came back from university with Truman Capote's In Cold Blood. And I read it at the age of 10, which I'm really not sure why anyone thought that was a great idea. But I read it, and that influenced me massively in terms of storytelling and how to take an audience and how to take a reader and to place them. In Cold Blood, Truman Capote does this extraordinary thing where you're there with the two drifter killers as they walk down the steps into the Clutter family's basement. You can smell the cheap hair oil and you can hear their cheap leather jackets squeaking, and that really influenced me about, murder, of course, is always horrific, but the more that you can place the audience and the reader in the shoes of the people who are discovering or who are in the situations, the more real and visceral I think it becomes. So I guess that's always influenced me a whole in my filmmaking as well as in my prose and literary work. But yes, absolutely. I think the point of view in the novel, I'm quite pleased, I guess, or proud of where we got to in terms of, I think it's very much you see the story from the detective's point of view, from Hannah's point of view, but at a certain point you also see it from the adversary's point of view. You do spend a lot of time inside the adversary, inside the killer's head, which was always important to me too, because what I wanted to do with this novel, because it was about trauma, the person that's doing these killings isn't doing so out of a lust for violence. It's the opposite. Every time this person kills, it tears them in two. And what they are doing is because they are being driven by a sense of, it's a misconstrued sense of justice and it's a warped sense of justice. But that's why they are doing what they are doing, you discover through the book. And I thought it was incredibly important to have the killer's perspective as well as the detective's perspective.
Because we understand the motivation for it. And even if we wouldn't agree with their methods, we understand why it happens. And you do that with this powerful sense of history, which is not didactic. It's seamless, sort of like In Cold Blood, which grounds the reader so gorgeously in the setting, looking at Kansas from above, and then into Hickok and Perry's heads. And Truman Capote doesn't know what they were thinking, and Truman Capote doesn't know what it was like in the Clutter household, and he just made it up. And yet it becomes real to us. And you've taken this story, which you just made up, and made it feel real because of the reality of the grounding of the history. What did you, if that makes any sense, did you start with the execution of the chief, or did you start with Hannah and then go back to realize that it would be about that?
It was a bit of both. I think, again, for we Māori who are creating in New Zealand, it's always about trying to turn the usual model on its head. Like the stories that I'm used to seeing, the white cop, the white hero, etc., etc. So very much I wanted to have a Māori protagonist, a Māori lead in the story. And very much, I'm surrounded in my world by extraordinary, strong Maori women. You know, my aunties, my sisters, my daughters, so many people around me. And, you know, I wanted, I guess, to make a kind of an amalgam of a whole lot of extraordinary women in my world, and put them in a job that none of those people have, but who that they'd be extraordinary at as a detective. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Well, it does perfectly, and it just making me think of a million more questions, because another thing that you do so gorgeously in this book is that Hannah is a really good detective, and she's very professional, and we get to know her from she has wonderful instincts, she has a wonderful sense of justice, she's absolutely super reliable, even sort of compulsively reliable about being a detective. She's also got a fractured family life, and she's trying to be a good mom as well. And the juxtaposition of her strength and devotion to her job and the strength and need that she has with her daughter is a wonderful balance. And then her daughter, you know, sort of coming into being a woman of her own as well, making her own judgments about the world in a way that Hannah should be proud of, that she has a mind of her own, but sometimes too much of a mind of her own. What was it like to write those two?
Oh, it was, you know, it's a privilege, because those two, the daughter as well, you know, as I said, it's sort of, you know, Hannah is inspired by a whole lot of strong women in my life. The daughter is pretty much a carbon copy of my youngest daughter, Matariki, down to the tattoos that I describe on Addison's arms. And that was the only moment that my daughter got a little bit grumpy, that I actually used her tattoos in the book. But my daughter is... Yeah, exactly. My daughter is exactly like Addison in many ways. You know, she's a poet. She's a performance poet and a writer and a director, and very, very driven by social justice, which is what Addison, Hannah's daughter, is driven by as well. And yes, you know, I think it's just so important that in the book, the female lead, you know, she's doing something that I think readers can just identify with so strongly. She's a woman trying to get ahead in a workplace which is male dominated, and the cops are still, certainly in New Zealand, a male dominated workplace. You know, she has to work twice as hard and be twice as brilliant to get as far as the other cops around her, and luckily she is twice as brilliant. But still, her ex-husband, who's maybe not quite as good a cop as she is, has risen above her faster and is her boss.
And they have to work together.
So, I mean, there's a whole lot of, you know, and like you say, she's from a fractured family, and she's trying to be the best mum that she can be to her daughter. So, you know, she's so identifiable, I think, to so many readers. But at the same time, she's in a completely different situation than pretty much any of us will be, in that she has to find and stop a serial killer before they complete their mission. Yeah.
And the description, I mean, and a couple of that was just the beginning of about 4 questions, and I will just take them one by one instead of pressuring them all together. Your style, let's start with that. Your style, and I wrote in my notes in the book, I wrote emotionally violent. It's emotionally violent because it's this clash of classes and cultures that is enraging and heartbreaking and true. And even it's physically violent too. The book is about a serial killer, sort of, but emotionally it's very violent as well. And I wonder what it was like for you to bring out the feelings that you do in the book from the Maoris and from Hannah specifically, and whether that was, well, what you pick a word. What was that like for you to write?
Yeah. I mean, the work that I've done in recent years has taken me into extraordinarily confronting situations, Hank. You talked briefly about the work that I did with on a case about a young Māori man called Teina Pora, who this was my last book and my last film. I really spent the last 10 years of my working life before this book fighting for justice for a young Māori man who'd been wrongfully imprisoned for 21 years for a crime he didn't commit. And that, for me, that was a case of, I've been working for a couple of decades and built up a certain set of skills. And that for me was the first time that I was actually able to use those skills for something that was beyond entertainment. It was trying to get justice, trying to win back a man's life. And the wonderful thing was that, because of the work that the private detective that I was working with and a bunch of journalists and I got very passionate about this case. And because of the work of a whole lot of people who did really amazing work, Tainer was freed, pardoned, compensated. He'd still lost 21 years of his life. But I guess, the biggest thing that came out of that for me was, when you talk about emotional violence and brutality, I think going into the depth of that story and becoming a really close friend to Tainer, the young man who'd been imprisoned, I guess I saw very much the amount of suffering that humans can put other humans through, and seeing the reality of that, not just in a theoretical way out of a textbook, but in a very real way, him and his family, what they went through. I mean, I guess for me, that took me as far down a certain path as I could possibly go, but it also became an access to me for being able to talk about, the kind of horror that's not horror in the traditional sense. Mm-hmm. That's about the brutality that a human being can experience, and I guess maybe the places that I go to in this book I wouldn't have been able to go to before I'd had the experience with Tainer.
Yeah, I wonder about that. My husband's a criminal defense attorney, so I am grateful for, and I'm a journalist, so I'm grateful for that. And I know that the power of that. And I know when you do a story like that makes such a difference in people's lives, and you feel success and sorrow at the same time, as you were saying, for the years that he lost, and for the others whose stories we don't tell. Who are in the same situation, but it's just sort of so one step at a time. I can't wait to see that. And have you seen The Thin Blue Line by Errol Morris? That was very
oh yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And that and In Cold Blood were very formative to me as well. So it's interesting to hear you talk about that. Your writing style as well is so cinematic in the way of, there are chapters in this book. We're talking about Better the Blood, a fantastic Hunter Westerman thriller by Michael Bennett, which I highly recommend to you all. And Michael, you're not taking this copy because this is mine, but Michael is giving away, and his publisher are giving away one copy of this book to one super lucky listener. So leave a question or a comment from Michael in the chat, and we will take some of those questions, and then we will draw a winner on the Wheel of Fun at the end of the show. Your style, there are chapters in the book, but inside each chapter are these little intense set piece scenes where something happens and your eyes get big. My eyes got bigger and bigger and bigger as I read it. And every single time it's something that's, moves the story ahead, is absolutely surprising, is absolutely gasp worthy. I mean, at the beginning, there's at least 3 things that happen in the first 10 pages that I could not believe. So the rhythm of your writing is so gorgeous. And then there are the thoughtful parts. And then there's another action part and then a thoughtful part. Talk a little bit about that pacing and rhythm and how you do that.
I think it's it's probably a lot informed by my background as a screenwriter. Absolutely. It's like a thing that I read a little while ago, which just clicked for me because it's exactly how I feel. Was that Alfred Hitchcock talks about the experience of reading a novel for him as being not reading words, but seeing a series of images inside his head on the little movie screen inside his head. And that's always been the case for me. Writing is me experiencing a whole lot of, not in a magical way, in a very I've got a series of events that are going to happen, how they're going to happen, and I imagine them very vividly in a little movie screen inside my head. And writing for me is actually watching the movie a couple of times, watching it till it feels about right, and then typing really fast to try and catch up with the
The
images.
whole movie, or just
in
scenes
my
of them?
head.
The whole movie.
Like in any particular scene, really. It's like running the scene and moving the characters around the space that they're in, and then once I figure that out inside my head, then it becomes then it goes down on the page. And so that's really about, I guess it's about my history as a screenwriter, thinking primarily visually. That I love dialogue, and I love writing good dialogue and character specific dialogue. But to me, the most important thing is the imagery and evoking very, very strongly, like Truman Capote does with the Clutter family and within Cold Blood, evoking not only the images of walking down that cold concrete stairwell into the basement, but the sounds, the sounds of fear coming down from in the basement, the smell of the hair oil, and we as writers just have such an incredibly huge toolkit of the things that we can do to get down to working on the back of people's spines where they really feel things.
I just got a shiver up my spine when you were saying that, because it's just so incredibly true. And it's interesting because when I'm writing and when I close my eyes and try to and sort of be in the scene, it's also instructive, because sometimes your brain will say, there are too many people here. Some of you have got to leave or stop talking, or it's night. The street lights would be on. Oh, what would I see if the street lights are on? Or it's noon. Where's lunch? Everybody is sort of hungry. Why? Because it becomes this real thing that you're writing. And so I think the only problem with closing your eyes and envisioning it is if you're really tired, then you just, that's too late. But so talk about this. Tell us, without spoilers, there's this is on the cover, this figure, this spiral. And Hannah gets the first indication that something has happened because she gets a video. No spoiler, but she gets a video, and she's obsessed by what this video is. I love the scene where she figures it out. Can you possibly, without giving anything away, talk about how her mind worked when she got the video?
So yeah, I'll tread quite carefully for the whole spoiler alert thing. So just to start with the symbol. So it's so this is in Māori culture, it's called a koru, and the koru, it comes from nature. I mean, it comes from the swirling of water in the river. It comes from behind me. You'll see a whole lot of ferns, native ferns. Most of the garden is native, and native ferns have they sprout new sprouts that are that exact shape. They're the spiral. So it's as an image, it comes up in our culture all over, time and again. It comes up in the carvings in our meeting houses that tell the stories of our ancestors and the trips across the ocean from Hawaii, which is our ancestral homeland, across the Pacific to New Zealand. It comes up in weaving, but it also comes up in tāmoko, which is, I'm sure if any of your readers have had any exposure to New Zealand culture and Māori culture, you would have seen the fabulous. I'm not tattooed. I'm not nearly brave enough to get tattoos on, but a lot of my family are, and the traditional tattoos very, very often have this kind of a symbol within the tattoos. So the symbol is, Hannah discovers a symbol similar to this left at a number of the murder sites. And at a certain point, she makes a connection between that it's not just a random symbol, that it means something, and it means something very specific to the Māori chief who was executed last century. But the other thing I want to say, Hank, just about this is that the book was a little bit of a family affair. So not only was the main character based on my partner and my aunties, etc., and my youngest daughter is kind of one of the characters, but also my daughter, who's an artist, she has done most of the book covers. So this is her work. My middle daughter is an artist, and this is the English version, and her that's her imagery on the tree trunk there. So
hold it closer to the camera so we can see it a little bit better. There we go. Oh my golly, that's beautiful.
Yeah. And that's all city. Yeah.
What did she say when she saw that?
Oh, she was blown away. Yes, she's I mean, she's a really wonderful artist, but to actually see it on covers, because it's on the Dutch cover, we've got 9 translations. It's on the German cover, it's on the Hungarian cover, and so she's kind of all over the world now, which is nice.
And her dad did it for her. That's with her. That's really marvelous. I love that it's a family affair. We're going to take questions in a minute, but let me just ask you. You said that you had 9 different languages. It's gotten so much. I don't want to say buzz so much as it is this is a thought-provoking, gorgeous, riveting detective story that is heartbreaking along the way and incredibly powerful. We're talking about Better the Blood by Michael Bennett, and we have heard so much about that today. What do you want? I mean, I know that at the end of the book, if I didn't cry, I almost did. And I haven't stopped thinking about it. How do you want people to feel at the end, and what do you want them to know that maybe they didn't know before?
I mean, it's a very unusual, and what I wonder, Hank, is that whether that emotion that you felt at the end, it was both about the detective, I'm sure, but I think, I wonder if it was also slightly for the protagonist, for the murderer, because that is really what I want the audience to feel, that there's a whole lot of victims in this story. The aftermath of colonization, what it's done to us as a people, is profound and deep and lasting, and the killer is also a victim, and that was one thing I wanted to do, was in the final chapters to explore that idea a little bit, that yes, the killer had to be stopped, yes, what they were doing was wrong, but I wanted the audience to understand them in a deep way and perhaps have empathy for them.
Because this spiral can be, the downward spiral of history, or it can be growth. It can be either of those. And I do think that you succeeded so wildly in this. Congratulations on a marvelous book. Let's take a couple of questions and see if we have questions. Was this always the title? Asks the fabulous Shannon Hansen.
No, it wasn't. Thank you for the question, Shannon. No, it was previously another title, which was based on a traditional proverb in New Zealand. But yeah, the title now comes at a certain point in the book. Another proverb is evoked about the relationship between the blood spilt today and the blood spilt in the past, and it became it did put its hand up as the title. Also, it's really interesting, like so many of the books I really admire are especially the crime books I admire are 3-word titles, like In Cold Blood and how many other novels. So yeah. No.
There's a rhythm of that as well, and it is a wonderful title. And you did mention that there's so much Maori culture in the book, so graciously offered and seamlessly offered with little footnotes from time to time, just that to sort of illuminate and sort of set it in our mind what that is, so they don't interrupt the gorgeous writing of your novel. So I'm grateful for that. It's so perfectly done. Who else has a question? Do you hope this is made into a film or miniseries? Well, it's already in your head as one. What do you think about that? Such a fun,
yes,
interesting question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's in development now. I have a production company, and I'm partnering with another production company. My partner and I are partnering with a second production company, and yes, we are developing it. It's a series, a 6-part series, and I think it's I had thought for a while that it might be a film, but there's only so much you can do in 90 minutes, and I think inevitably, what I'm proud about this book is that it is a crime thriller that really ticks genre boxes. I mean, I think it is something that it has forward momentum, and you're wanting to find out what happens next. And there's a ticking clock. 6 killings will happen unless Hannah can stop But also, that's one layer, but there's also very much the social layer of history. And I know that if we made it into a 90-minute film, the crime thriller genre aspects would survive. I'm not sure this layer would survive. That would be the first thing to go. So the wonderful thing about where we've got to in the world of streaming is with the, as a 6-part by 1 hour series becoming the norm for storytelling now, is that you can go so profoundly deeply into not just the story, but the characters behind the story and the truths behind the story, which is so definitely a 6 by 1 part series.
It sounds perfect, and the truths behind the story are a story in themselves. So again, this is something that was very visual and very filmable, and I absolutely cannot wait to see it. I can picture in my mind, where else would I picture it? I can picture the scene in the parking lot and the judge saying, however, I mean, that however moment, I'm not going to say any more about that, but you know what I mean, was just, perfect. It was perfect. One last question. Shall we take one last question? What are you working on now? Says Janine.
Thank you, Janine. Yes, well, I'm literally finishing the first draft of book 2 of the Hannah Westerman series. So if you enjoy Better the Blood, so it's not just going to be a one-off. Part 2 is coming out, I think, in the United States. It must be next year, 2024. And yeah, so I'm hopefully in about a week I'm going to be finishing the first pass of that, and then starting work on the adaptation of the first book. Yeah.
I cannot wait. So you're just you're in the process of writing the screenplay for it. So it's too early for me to ask who you've cast for it.
No, we've got very strong ideas about who it will be. We're so blessed in New Zealand. We've got the most amazing Māori performers who are not necessarily that well known internationally, but I think, and we will absolutely cast authentically with Māori lead actors, and just their talent. I cannot wait to put those faces and that talent on the screen for the rest of the world to see. Yeah.
Well, you have a whole new crop of viewers who are just sitting on go to see this series, and you can read Better the Blood before, so you'll know before anyone else what the story is. Michael, you're absolutely amazing. I'm just so honored to be talking with you today. Let's spin the wheel of fun and see who wins a copy of this book, and this is so magical here. We will see.
Oh, this is brilliant.
I always want music. I think there should be music. And the winner is Irma Flores Monges. Thank you. This is great, Irma. Are you
brilliant? I wish I could sign it for you, Irma.
I do too. But we will get you a copy of this, Irma, and congratulations. The rest of you, you know what to do. Run right out and get Better the Blood. You will absolutely love it. Michael, thank you for being here today. I hope you've enjoyed it. And stay safe.
Very much. And I think the worst of it is past. Well, I hope so anyway. And good luck with the house guest. Is it next week?
It's next Tuesday. I forgot about it for a whole half hour. So thank you very much. And now I'm back to worry.
Exciting.
It is exciting. It is exciting. It is. It never gets old, and it never gets unwonderful, and it never gets unstressful. And I'm so glad to be here with all of you for that. So let me show you very, very quickly before you go, Michael, and before you all go. And thank you so much for coming. Next week at 4 o'clock, next Tuesday at 4 p.m. ET, I will be talking to, look at this, Harriet Tice with It Ends at Midnight. And I have not read one word of this book yet, except Alex Michaelides on the front says, I devoured this explosive, gripping novel in a couple of sittings and raced to the shocking end. So I'm about to race to the shocking end myself. I cannot wait to talk with Harriet Tice. Harriet is my real name too, so we are sisters so much. So I will see you for Harriet Tice next Tuesday at 4 p.m. ET. And the rest of you, Michael, thank you. You all in the comments, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
You all. Yeah. And you remember, it is always safe inside a book. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.